Okay, I think we're going to give it a couple more minutes just so that a few people can join. In the meantime, to those of you that are here, welcome. We're really happy to have you with us in the session. I hope you are having an amazing Jata Jati so far, and that you've spoken to many amazing people from all around the world and attended lots and lots of interesting different sessions. Like I say, we're just going to give it a couple minutes.
Alrighty, so welcome to everybody, and of course, a very good morning from Malaysia. So I will be your facilitator today, and my name is Lincoln. So with us today, we have Miss Kathleen from South Africa. So just a short introduction about Miss Kathleen. She's currently the board member of Scouts South Africa. And then prior to that, she was a South Africa youth advisor, as in the South Africa region. And then, of course, professionally, she's actually working on dealing with sustainability. So today we will have a session on NSOs. Sustainability starts with us. So let's hear her out. All right. So Miss Kathleen, take it away.
Thanks, Lincoln, and thank you everyone for joining us tonight. It is a great, well, tonight in my part of the world, I'm not sure what time it is where you are, but here in South Africa, it is a warm summer evening. So I'm glad to be with you all. So as Lincoln says, today we're going to be talking about sustainability. And in particular, we're going to talk a little bit about sustainability in our Scout organizations and where we can start and how we can go forward with being more sustainable, with sustainable projects, and with actions that we can take as Scout organizations or in our individual countries to be more sustainable as an organization. Now, this is something that I find really exciting. When I was a youth advisor to the Africa Scout Committee, which was one of my roles up until just over a month ago, we did a lot of sustainability in projects in the Africa region. We've also done a lot in my National Scout organization, some projects which I've run, and of course, some projects at work. So it's really exciting to be able to talk with all of you about sustainability. So the only thing is, when we say sustainability, what on earth do we mean? Because sustainability is one of those words, everybody says it all the time. We say we want to be sustainable. Sustainability is important. We say it's one of our priorities in the coming years. But what do we mean when we say sustainability? And as you can see on my screen, I have a little bit of a Slido going. So if you can go to slido.com and enter the code 1845060 or scan the QR code on the screen, and then you can let us know in a few words of your own, what do you think sustainability is? Is there a keyword which you think is part of sustainability? And I'm going to take us across to my Slido and see if anyone has managed to join us. I don't see anyone there yet, to find out, what do you guys think sustainability means? Okay, help the planet, that's a good one. Recycling, social equality, now that's important. That's a great word right there. And ecological consumption. Okay, I'm getting some good feedback here. Codependence. So I'm guessing by that you mean that we all need to depend on each other and work with each other for the planet and for the future. Interdependence. Protect the sea. Okay, that's a nice one as well. A wise use of raw materials. Okay, great stuff. That is a really important part of sustainability and building a better future. Ecological consumption, clean energy. Okay, circular economy. That's a really great one. Lovely. So I hope everyone maybe has come across the phrase circular economy, but what that means is it has to do with how we bring things back into this circular cycle when we use them. So for example, maybe I use a plastic container one day to get lunch, and then that plastic container is used again by someone who recycles to make jewelry. And eventually, when they're no longer using the jewelry, those materials are used again. So that's a really simple example. It can be a lot more complicated than that, but the circular economy is all about how do we use things again and again and again. Freedom for future generations. Okay. And that's a great one because the word freedom can mean a lot of different things. And we'll get a little bit more into it as we go along. But of course, freedom, it can mean freedom of speech, freedom to determine your own destiny. But it can also mean freedom to grow and develop and learn new things. So that's a nice one. That's really interesting. So I'm going to leave this open for now. If you all have more thoughts, you can continue to add those in. And I'm going to take us back to my presentation, and let's talk a little bit more about sustainability. So there are 4 pillars of sustainability. And we say the first pillar is human, the second one is social, then we have economic, and then we have environmental. Now let's look a little bit more at what each of these things mean. Now, human sustainability really means, are humans able to live functioning well? Do they have skills? Are they able to support the organization? And do they have well-being in their community and in their society? So an example of that would be an investment in health or in education, or access to services like healthcare, like schools, like childcare, for example. It could also be nutrition, could be an example. Do you have enough of the right foods to eat? And also, do you as a human have the knowledge and skills that you need to be able to care for yourself, to find employment, or to sustain your own livelihood? So these are examples of human sustainability. Now, we also get social sustainability, and we might think, okay, social sustainability, human sustainability, isn't that kind of the same thing? Now, it's not exactly the same, because when we say social sustainability, we're asking people to invest and create services that keep our society going. Now, when we say society, we mean those spoken or unspoken social laws that cause people to treat each other in the right way. You could have social quality. How do you interact with each other? Is there opportunity to do that? Is there respect and security when you're interacting with other people? Now, informal social sustainability has to do with cohesiveness in society, friendships, relationships, communities. And then we have something that's a little bit more formalized, but is still social sustainability. And that comes to laws, information, structures like the courts and the police that make sure that humans are treating each other the right way, that we all have our human rights being abided by. So we've looked at human, we've looked at social. Now we're going to look at economic. Now, economic sustainability is a little bit of a touchy subject, right? Because some people say, well, capital doesn't matter and money doesn't matter. If we maintain the human and we maintain the social and we maintain the environment, then economic is irrelevant. And other people say, well, no matter what you do, you'll still need some form of economy in your society, some form of trade, some form of exchange, some form of payment. So it's a little bit of a complicated one, because you get people who are like, yay, economic, and you get people who are like, no, economic. I think a balanced way of looking at it is, in the world that we currently live in, economic sustainability is a necessity, and therefore we should always take it into consideration when we're planning something or making a strategy for the future. Because as National Scout organizations, or even on a smaller level, as rover crews or scout groups, we all in some way or another interact with money, with capital, with property, or with assets. So we do need to think about economic sustainability as well. And the last one, which I think you'll probably all be familiar with, is environmental sustainability. And this is where we talk about the land, the air, the water, the minerals, and all of our other natural assets. Now, the aim here is to meet the needs of humans or the human population without compromising the needs of our future generations and without doing short or long-term harm to our environment. And I think this is one that we can all say we've come across before. So again, these are our 4 pillars. We have human, social, economic, and environmental. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with our Sustainable Development Goals. If you look at them, you see many of the pillars that we have discussed, we can match to our SDGs. For example, we can match zero hunger to human. We can also match good health and well-being and education to human. But we can map something like peace, justice, and strong institutions to social. And we can map no poverty and sustainable cities and decent work can also be mapped to economic. And life on land, climate action, life below water, those can be mapped to environmental. Some of them can be mapped to more than one of our pillars of sustainability. For example, a sustainable city and community would almost hit all 4 of our options, because a sustainable community takes care of humans, has a strong social system, is economically viable, and looks after the environment. So they don't all only fall under one thing, if that makes sense. And the reason I want to highlight that is, what I don't want us to do is look at these 4 pillars and say, okay, whenever I do anything, I have to meet all 4 of these pillars, because that's not always possible. We should always consider them when we're planning, but we do not necessarily have to 100% accommodate all 4 pillars of sustainability in one project or in one initiative. You could have more than one project or more than one initiative, and there, by having more than one, you can meet all of your pillars and meet all of your goals. Okay, so I've put together what I think are 5 ways for a National Scout organization or a group working together to have an effective sustainability initiative. Now, the first one is do what works. And by this, I mean a couple of things. The first one is, if you're putting together a project or an initiative, you're putting together that initiative for you, for your context, for your community, or for your National Scout organization. Now, what works for my friend in Malaysia might not work in exactly the same way for a rover crew here in South Africa, or for a National Scout organization from Asia or from America. We need to do what works in our own context and look at what our specific needs are. Now, you can take inspiration from all over the world, and that's one of the great things about scouting. You can take inspiration, advice, and help from anywhere. But remember to do what works for you and your context, and make the changes that you need to make for a really successful project or initiative. My second suggestion is start simple and then later on build momentum. Now, I'm going to give an example from my personal experience. In South Africa, we ran a project called the Scout Spekboom Project. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to teach young people to plant a specific kind of plant that was really good for the environment, really simple for them to grow, easy for them to understand how to make new plants, how to take care of them. So we started by giving each scout group in one of our provinces 5 plants so that they could run an activity with their young people and take care of those 5 trees. Now, over time, those 5 trees, they could take cuttings from those trees, grow more trees. We had additional activities with young people. And now we have a children's book that's being written for our younger ages to understand even better how to take care of this project. And this project is mitigating our carbon footprint as a National Scout organization. Now, we started simply, we thought, wouldn't it be cool if our young people could grow plants? And over time, that developed into a whole initiative with many different people using their skills to build the project well. Another example that I can give is that I know of a national campsite that in the past did not have any sustainable initiatives in place. Now, they started simple. They said a first step that we can take is implementing recycling on our campsite and for all of the events that occur at our campsite. So they started simple with the recycling project, and over time, they will scale and increase to be more effective. My third way is be repeatable. It's great to have an amazing idea, but if that idea is only going to be something that happens once for 10 minutes and never again, for whatever reason that might be, maybe it was too expensive, maybe it was too difficult for people to understand, maybe you lost your local partner. It was still a good initiative while it lasted, but it will be an even better initiative if, like our recycling initiative, it's something that you can repeat, that you can do again and again and improve over time. Our fourth is measure your impact. Now, I'm not saying you have to get a fancy person to come in and calculate all of your specific carbon calculations and all of these different things. There are ways that you can measure impact that don't necessarily involve you having to hire a professional and spend money, which, although you can do that if you want to. But you can also measure your impact in other ways. You can measure your impact by number of people that were educated through this initiative. You could measure it by number of bags of recycling that were recycled rather than went to landfill. You could measure it by number of meat-free Mondays that have occurred in scouting events this year. There are various different ways that you can measure impact that are, in their own ways, very effective. And my last way is share with others. Now, I now have an effective sustainability initiative. It makes sense for me to share what I have done with other people, either locally, within my NSO, within different areas of my country, and wider with other countries, with other National Scout organizations, even on scout.org, so that anyone from around the world can see what is my effective sustainability initiative. Now, okay, we have our 5 ways. We have our 4 pillars of sustainability. Let's quickly go back to Slido, and I'm going to ask you to look at my 5 things that I have given you, and I'm going to ask you to rank them and say, what do you think is the most important? So if you think measure impact is most important, you can pull that up to the top of your screen. But if you think do what works is the most important, then you can leave that in as number 1. So if you're able to come back to my Slido and just tell me, what do you think is the most important? Once again, here is our code. It's 1845060, and there's a QR code over here as well. I'm going to pause my screen share while people rank so that I can see how people are answering questions. And in the meantime, I think I've got a few interesting questions in the chat box, which is always exciting. So I have a great question from Liam, who says, what can I do to make my next camp with cubs more sustainable? Now, I think that is a great question, because especially with children of a younger age, there's a lot of different ways where we can make sustainability fun for them. So, for example, you could do recycling, and I'm going to give an example. I've seen recycling bins where they look like monsters. And one monster eats paper and one monster eats glass. And the kids have a lot of fun feeding the monster with the trash, which is always a crowd pleaser. You can also do it in a less direct way. So for example, when you're planning a camp, let's think about what you need to plan. You need to plan food, you need to plan a venue, you need to plan transport, you need to get people to attend. So let's say, okay, food, could maybe one of the nights on camp, could you serve a vegetarian meal, for example? Or could you source local produce instead of imported produce? Could you, before dinner time, talk to your cubs about why it's important that food should be grown locally, or that it should be food that's in season? Then if you look at, say, travel, for example, would you rather have 10 parents all drive in a car to bring their cubs to cub camp? Or is it better to get one car, or to all go on a train, or all go on a bus? Which option is more sustainable? So look at the activities that you're doing, the things that you need to plan, and for each of them say, is there a way that I can make this more sustainable? Is there something I can do, whether it's big or small, to incorporate sustainability into the camp? And then I have another question that I want to answer quickly that says, is it sustainable to make campfires? Now, this is a good question, because as Scouts, we love campfires. It's always great to sit around a fire, tell some stories, sing some songs, and have a great evening. But is it sustainable? Now, for this, you can ask a couple of questions. Now, I'm not going to say it's impossible for anything to say, or in any situation to say yes or no, something is completely sustainable. Rather, think of a way that you can make it more sustainable. So for example, the wood that you're burning in your campfire, is that wood that you picked up that had already fallen from a tree? Or did someone go and chop down a tree for you guys to have wood? The first option would be, of course, more sustainable. You could also say a question, okay, maybe campfires release some gases into the air. That's not always a good thing. Maybe I can mitigate that, and on my camp or in the next week, I can plant a couple more trees to try and mitigate that impact. Another way that you can look at it is you can say, when I made my campfire, did I use natural sources, dried leaves and wood? Or did I use gasoline and artificial accelerants, which might be bad for the planet? So I won't say a fire is 100% sustainable, but I will say there are ways to make it more sustainable. And that's what we're going for as Scouts and in society. How do we make things more sustainable? Okay, I'm going to come back to our screen here, and I'm going to see, what do you guys think is most important? And I think we have some interesting answers here. You think it's most important to start simple. Then after that, you think, okay, we started simple, now we should be repeatable. Then we say, okay, let's do what works. And after we know what works, we can share with others and we can measure our impact. So just a fun activity to see, what do you all think about our 5 steps for sustainability? So I've been talking for about half an hour now. I'm going to pause for a second, and I'm going to ask my other chat facilitator, what do you think is the most important?
Hi, Kathleen. Thank you. I personally have already voted, so I think that we need to, like anybody else, I think we need to start simple. That's the most important one, because that is where we will feel that do what works actually will come way better if we start simple. So probably we will be able to see that the things that we start simple will be able to, I don't know, maybe we can get it done, and then that will get us motivated. So I think based on these 5 suggested points, I'm also interested to know actually because based on the Q&As and then a lot of questions they were asking about how do we do this, and that mostly one of those pillars that I can see is quite distinct is that they link to environment, right? So since we are under this international adult corner, so how about the human side? I mean, one of the pillars will be human, right? So how this going to sustain us as adult leaders as we volunteer ourselves? So is there any pointers, Kathleen?
Well, I think that is a really good question, because I think the way that we treat and look after our adult volunteers is really, really important. Now, I don't want to dive too far down a rabbit hole, but I will say that I think our Adults in Scouting team has done a lot of really good work on putting together the Adults in Scouting life cycle and looking at things like training for adults and retention for adults, and thanking them for the work that they do as volunteers. So I think when we think about our adult volunteers, the kind of things that you'll find when you look at WASM services and you look at Adults in Scouting, the kind of information that you'll find there will really help your organization and your group to become more sustainable.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Yeah, so apart from there, what would be the project, or rather, or would it be your suggestions if we put, like start simple, be repeatable, all this right into the human aspect or the human pillars of sustainability? So what would be your suggestion, for example, like as an adult leader for ourselves, because we were talking about how the organization will be supporting our adult leaders. So how about us? For example, if I'm volunteering myself, so how would that actually help me to get myself sustained in this organization? Thank you.
Well, that is also a really great question. So I think that if you follow similar steps for yourself as an adult leader, you'll be able to become more sustainable for yourself as well. For example, if you're sharing with others about your experience, you can support them and they can support you in turn. And if you start simple with yourself as an adult leader, whether that's you're a volunteer new to Scouting, or whether you're an adult leader who wants to start a project. Either way, starting simple and starting from the beginning will help you to grow over time. And growing over time is always better than jumping into the middle of a lake and hoping you learn how to swim. It's much easier if someone teaches you, right? So a lot of these steps match up to human sustainability and social sustainability as well. If you start simple, you have maybe one priority, one thing that you want to learn or one thing that you want to achieve. Then you achieve that, it will keep you motivated. And then you share with others and they will keep you motivated as well. And measuring impact, you'll think, wow, I taught 50 young people about local food today. I've had an impact on their life and how they are sustainable, and that's motivating for me as well. So the steps, I think, should apply to all of your pillars that we shared earlier on.
So there you go, our friends online, that not only that these 5 suggestions will actually be able to help us with the most prominent one about social and environment, but it's also very helpful in terms of personal development or sustainability as adult leaders. So I will pass back to Kathleen to proceed to continue with her session. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thanks, Lincoln. I had one more question that I want to quickly answer before I jump back in. And that question says, I'm an adult and I work with cubs, and I feel like the SDGs are quite complicated to teach them. It's like a big topic. It's a lot of information. It's difficult to make it come across to them effectively. And I think that is a really good point. And how I usually teach things like the SDGs to our younger audience is I don't show them 17 SDGs and make them learn the names, because that's more like formal education. And in scouting, we want non-formal education. We want fun, we want practical learning. So what I usually do is I might take them on a walk around the neighborhood. And when we get back, I might ask them, did you see anything in the neighborhood that you thought could be better, something that we need to fix? Maybe there was some litter, or maybe there were some people who need some social support that, you know, maybe don't have financial support or don't have jobs. If you tie it to their local context and you say, okay, these are the things that you think we can do better, then I bring that back and I say, well, those are really great ideas. We have this thing, it's called an SDG, and it helps us to match these things that we want to solve according to these priorities that we have. And these are goals that we share across the whole world. Every young person in every country around the world also has these goals. They also have things in their community that they want to solve. And I link it back that way. I link it to their local context, those things that they know instinctively could be better, those people that they want to help, those things that they already know could improve. And I often link it back that way. We also do a fun activity where we put the SDGs on pencils. So I have 17 pencils, and we sit in a group and we just have a conversation about community and about the world and things that are important to us. And when we mention one of the SDGs, that person or that child gets awarded a pencil. And at the end of the evening, we look at all the pencils and we say, oh, we've hit all 17 of these goals for how we can live a really great life. So there's lots of ways that we can make something like this understandable. And it doesn't mean you have to use 17 very big, complicated context definitions and titles. We can bring it back to the level of young people in a fun and interactive way. So now you might ask me, okay, we have the 4 pillars, we have the 5 steps, but I still don't have a budget and I don't know where to start and I don't have any paid staff. And don't worry, don't panic, everything's going to be okay. Just remember, the point of being more sustainable as an individual, as a group, as a National Scout organization is not to solve everything right now, immediately, all at once, because that is difficult and stressful for anyone to be able to consider. And if you look at the world, we haven't quite got that right yet at a global level either. What we need to do is become more sustainable, take it step by step to reduce bad impacts and increase good impacts, and set good examples to our young people, to our fellow adults, and to other organizations around that world, inside scouting, outside scouting, wherever we come across people who might like to hear our message. Okay, so that is actually my last point. I'm going to take a couple, I don't see any more questions here. And I know that some of our guests would also really like to have our code for the session. So I'm going to say the code is over here on the screen. It's FGS20. So I'm going to thank you all for joining us, and I'll be around for another few minutes if anyone has some more questions that they want to put in the Q&A or anything they'd like to ask. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining us, and for the rest of your Jata Jati, happy scouting.
Thank you, Kathleen. So while we are waiting for a few more minutes, if we have questions, so just going to wrap things up, right? Yeah. So, and right, thank you very much, Kathleen. Even myself, I find that actually very intriguing. Okay, a short session, but very informative. And I think personally, I like that start small. Oh, sorry. Yeah, start simple, because it actually goes very well with our in our context, because we are actually talking about scout anyway. So as long as we do scouting or simply scouting, I think we will get there. And like you said, we are not here to solve the problems now and also, of course, immediately. So I think as long as we are doing scouting, we will take things slow, one step at a time. So yeah, and I've really enjoyed the session. So thank you very much, Kathleen, for sharing with us your thoughts. And here I think we only have only one last question here, Liam, and I think Kathleen has answered. Oh yeah, thank you. I love the idea of the pencils. Where can I learn as adult more about SDGs? And I think Kathleen is answering the question. So
Yeah, I was typing.
okay.
But I can answer that live as well. So there's a lot of wonderful information about the SDGs out there. We have a lot of great resources about the SDGs in scout.org in our own channels. If you look at things like Earth Tribe, for example, or Scouts for SDGs, in particular in Scouts for SDGs. So if you go to scout.org and you go to members and services, you'll find a lot of documents, information, programs that you can take a look at and harness in your context. But there's also other areas as well, such as the UN has a lot of information. Many people have information out there on the SDGs. So I would encourage you to take some time and explore it a little bit more.
Yeah, so thank you so much. Okay. Yeah, we have one more question. Oh yeah. Tell me the code another time. Okay, it's not relevant. All right. I think that's the last question that we have. So we have 1 minute left. So thank you, Kathleen, for the session. And I think we have come to an end to our session. Would it be okay? And I hope all of you have been enjoying yourself. And I really enjoyed the session. So I think that's all for our session. And I thank you for joining us. And I will see you again in the next session.
Thank you, Lincoln. And thank you again, everyone, for joining.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Have a good, whatever time of day it is for you.